The mahogany clock in the hallway struck 6, its steady chime echoing through the silent house. Arthur Bennett sat by the window, his gaze fixed on the manicured lawn of the Willow Creek retirement community. He was 74, a man once defined by the precision of his architectural blueprints, now defined by the pill organizers and physical therapy schedules that cluttered his side table. His daughter, Alina, was due at 6:15. She was never late. Alina was the CEO of a thriving tech marketing firm, a woman of spreadsheets and high-stakes negotiations. To the outside world, she was the model daughter. She checked on him every Tuesday and Thursday without fail. But as Arthur watched her sleek silver SUV pull into the driveway, he felt a familiar, hollow ache in his chest. It was a feeling he had been trying to name for months. He had recently read an article in a psychology journal left in the lobby titled 6 Signs of Superficial Care, and as he watched Alina step out of the car, phone already pressed to her ear, he wondered if he was about to check every box on that list. The front door opened with the practiced turn of a key. "Dad, I'm here," Alina called out. Her voice was bright, professional, and slightly breathless. She walked into the living room, her eyes scanning the space before they landed on him. She didn't approach him first. Instead, she went straight to the kitchen counter. "I brought the organic green juices and the low-sodium meals I ordered," she said, her back to him. "Hello, Alina," Arthur said softly. "The garden is looking wonderful this evening. Did you see the roses?" Alina glanced at her gold wristwatch. "I saw them, Dad. Very red. Look, I've only got 45 minutes today before the board dinner. Did you take your vitamin D?" Arthur felt the first sign click into place. Efficiency over empathy. Her visit wasn't a visit, it was an appointment. Alina sat on the edge of the armchair opposite him. She didn't lean back. She looked like a person waiting for a bus that was already late. "So how was your week?" she asked. "Well," Arthur began, "I had a bit of a scare on Wednesday. My chest felt tight and I called the nurse. It turned out to be nothing but a bit of indigestion, but it made me think about your mother. Remember how she used to?" "That's good, Dad. Glad it was just indigestion," Alina interrupted, her eyes darting to a notification on her phone. "Did the physical therapist come? Is your hip feeling stronger?" She hadn't heard a word about his fear or the memory of his late wife. This was the second sign, selective hearing. She listened for health data but ignored human emotion. She wanted to hear that the machine, his body, was functioning so she could feel she had done her duty. Alina said, standing up to rearrange the photos on his mantle. "I told my colleagues today how much I prioritize these visits. They were so impressed that I make time twice a week." She took out her phone and snapped a quick photo of the two of them. "Smile, Dad. I want to show the kids you're doing well." Arthur forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. As soon as the shutter clicked, she was back to checking emails. This was the third sign, the audience factor. Her care seemed to exist, at least in part, to bolster her own identity as a good daughter. If no one knew she was caring for him, would she still be here? Alina said, pulling a sleek box device from her designer bag. "It's a top-of-the-line air purifier with HEPA filters and an app that monitors air quality in real time. It cost a fortune, but nothing is too good for you." Arthur looked at the expensive plastic box. He didn't need an air purifier. He needed someone to sit with him and finish the crossword puzzle. He needed someone to ask him why he looked sad when the sun went down. "Thank you, Alina," he said, "but you know the old fan works just fine." "Nonsense, this is better," she insisted. This was the fourth sign, gifts as a shield. She used money and things to bridge the emotional gap she wasn't willing to cross. It was easier to buy a $500 machine than to spend 5 minutes listening to his grief. Arthur decided to push. He wanted to see if there was any of his little Ellie left under the corporate armor. "Alina, I've been thinking about the house, the big house on Oak Street. I think it's time we talk about selling it. It's sitting empty, and it makes me heavy just thinking about the dust settling on your mother's piano." Alina's posture stiffened. "Dad, we don't have time for the big talks today. Let's keep it light. Why don't you tell me about the bridge club? Did Mr. Henderson lose his teeth again?" She laughed, a practiced, melodic sound. Arthur didn't laugh. He saw the fifth sign, emotional deflection. Whenever the conversation turned toward the reality of aging, loss, or the future, she pivoted to a joke or a triviality. She kept the relationship on the surface because the depths were too inconvenient. At exactly 6:58 p.m., Alina's phone buzzed with an alarm. "Oh, look at that, time flies," she said, already standing and grabbing her coat. "I've got to run, but you're good, right? You have the juice, the meals, and the purifier. You're all set." She leaned over and gave him a perfunctory peck on the cheek. Her skin was cold, and she smelled of expensive perfume and stress. "I'm all set, Alina," Arthur said, his voice flat. "Great, see you Thursday. Love you." She was out the door before he could say it back. He watched her SUV disappear down the drive. That was the final sign, the exit strategy. Her departure was always punctuated by a sense of relief, as if she were checking off the final item on a grueling to-do list. The house fell into a silence so profound it felt heavy. Arthur looked at the organic juice on the counter. He looked at the air purifier blinking its blue quality light at him. He realized then that concern and care are not the same thing. Concern is a duty, care is a connection. Alina was concerned about his vitals, his safety, and her reputation. But she did not care for him, not the man inside the aging frame. 2 days later, Thursday arrived. The clock struck 6:15. The silver SUV pulled in. When Alina entered, she found Arthur not in his usual chair, but sitting at the small kitchen table. On the table were 2 cups of tea and a single, yellowed photograph. "Dad, I'm here, I brought." "Sit down, Alina," Arthur said. His voice wasn't loud, but it had a weight that stopped her in her tracks. "I really don't have long, the merger." "Sit down," he repeated, "just for 10 minutes. The merger will still be there, but I might not be." Alina blinked, startled by his bluntness. She slowly sat across from him. "What is it? Are you feeling okay? Should I call the doctor?" "That's exactly the problem," Arthur said, sliding the photograph toward her. It was a picture of her as a 7-year-old, sitting on his lap at the beach. Both were covered in sand, laughing hysterically at a seagull. "In this picture," Arthur said, "you didn't care if I was healthy or if my air was filtered. You just wanted to be with me, and I just wanted to be with you." Alina looked at the photo, her professional facade flickering. "Dad, I'm doing my best. I'm making sure you have the best care money can buy." "You're providing maintenance, Alina, not care," Arthur said gently. "I read something recently about the signs of superficial concern. I realized that our visits have become a series of transactions. You check my pills, you check your watch, you take a photo for your friends, and you leave. You're physically here, but you're already gone." Alina opened her mouth to defend herself, but Arthur held up a hand. "I don't want the juices. I don't want the gadgets. I want to know if you're happy. I want to tell you that I miss your mother so much it feels like a physical weight in this room. I want to be your father, not your project." The silence that followed was different from the silence after she left. This was a heavy, pregnant silence. Alina looked down at her gold watch. She looked at the blue light of the air purifier. Then she looked at her father's hands, spotted with age, trembling slightly, but still the hands that had built her dollhouses and held her when she scraped her knees. A crack appeared in her armor, her eyes welled up. "I'm so busy, Dad. Everything is moving so fast. If I stop to think about you getting older or Mom being gone, I don't think I'll be able to keep going." "So that's it," Arthur whispered. "The superficiality isn't because you don't care, it's because you're afraid to." Alina let out a sob, a raw, unpolished sound that had no place in a boardroom. She reached across the table and took his hand. Her grip wasn't the brisk, professional squeeze of her usual greeting. It was tight, desperate, and real. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've been treating you like a task because I can't handle the thought of lose you." "You're losing me anyway, Alina," Arthur said, his own eyes damp. "You're losing the time we have left by spending it on things that don't matter." Alina reached into her bag. For a moment, Arthur thought she was grabbing her phone to check the time. Instead, she turned it off completely and set it face down on the table. "Tell me about the house on Oak Street," she said, her voice shaking but present. "Tell me about the piano." Arthur felt a warmth spread through him that no HEPA filter or organic juice could ever provide. The 6 signs he had memorized were being erased, one by one. Efficiency was replaced by presence. They talked for 2 hours. Selective hearing was replaced by deep listening. She heard his grief and shared her own. The audience was forgotten. No photos were taken for social media. The gifts were pushed aside. The tea went cold, but the connection was hot. The avoidance was gone. They cried together over the memories of his wife. The rushed exit never happened. She canceled her dinner. As the sun set, casting long, golden shadows across the room, the house no longer felt like a waiting room for the end of life. It felt like a home again. When Alina finally left, 3 hours later, she didn't rush. She stood in the doorway looking back at him. "I'll see you Saturday, Dad," she said. "And I'm bringing the kids, not for a photo, just to sit in the grass." Arthur smiled, a real smile this time. "I'd like that, Alina." He sat back in his chair as her car pulled away. He didn't need a psychology journal to tell him the difference anymore. He knew that genuine concern doesn't look like a checklist. It looks like a daughter who is willing to turn off the world just to hear her father's heart. The title of the article he had read remained on the coffee table, 6 Signs of Superficial Care. Is your child's concern genuine? Arthur picked up the magazine, folded it, and placed it in the recycling bin. He didn't need it anymore. He had his answer, and more importantly, he had his daughter back. The mahogany clock struck 10. The house was silent, but for the first time in years, Arthur didn't feel alone. He felt cared for. "Would you like me to explore another story theme? Perhaps one focusing on a different type of relationship dynamic?" The Saturday sun was warmer than usual, casting a honey-colored glow over the retirement community's communal gardens. Arthur sat on a wooden bench, his cane resting against his knee. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't watching the clock. He was watching the entrance. When the silver SUV appeared, it didn't feel like a ticking countdown. This time, the car was filled with noise. 2 teenagers, Leo and Maya, spilled out of the back, followed by Alina. She wasn't wearing her charcoal power suit. She was in jeans and a soft sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. "Grandpa," Maya called out, running across the grass. As they settled around him, Arthur noticed the shift immediately. There was no agenda. There was no wellness check. Alina sat on the grass at his feet, ignoring the grass stains on her clothes that would have horrified her a week ago. The 7th sign, shared vulnerability. "Dad," Alina said, looking up at him while the kids played a card game on the picnic blanket. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the signs. I realized I was doing it at work too, providing solutions, but never actually connecting with my team. I was so afraid of the messiness of feelings that I turned everything into a system." Arthur nodded, reaching out to pat her shoulder. "Systems are safe, Ellie, but life is meant to be felt, not just managed." This was the beginning of the real healing. It wasn't just about Arthur's old age. It was about Alina's middle age, the sandwich generation pressure that had turned her heart into a calculator. The house on Oak Street. Later that afternoon, they did something they hadn't done in 5 years. They drove to the old family home. The air inside the house on Oak Street was stale, smelling of lemon polish and memories. Alina didn't walk through the rooms checking for dust or structural damage. She went straight to the piano. She ran her fingers over the keys, producing a discordant but haunting sound. "Mom tried to teach me Claire de Lune right here," Alina whispered. "I used to get so frustrated because my hands were too small." "You have your mother's hands," Arthur said, standing in the doorway. "I see them every time you reach for something. I used to look away because it hurt. I think that's why we both stayed on the surface for so long. The truth, the genuine stuff, it hurts." They spent the afternoon opening boxes. They found old drawings, a pressed flower from a prom 40 years ago, and a collection of Arthur's early blueprints. The shift in conflict. The conflict was no longer between a father and a superficial daughter. It was now a collective struggle against the passage of time. They weren't fighting each other. They were fighting the silence they had let grow between them. Leo, the oldest grandson, found a box of old vinyl records. "Can we play one?" he asked. "The record player might be a bit temperamental," Arthur warned. As the crackling sound of an old jazz record filled the dusty living room, Leo and Maya began to dance, a clumsy, modern interpretation of a swing dance. Alina laughed. It wasn't her meeting-ready laugh. It was a deep, belly-aching laugh that made her eyes crinkle. The resolution of the heart. As evening approached, they prepared to leave. Alina stood in the kitchen, looking at the heights marked in pencil on the pantry door frame. "I'm not going to sell it yet, Dad," she said. "I think we should come here once a month, to clean, to talk, to remember. It shouldn't be a tomb, it should be a bridge." Arthur felt a weight lift off his shoulders that he hadn't realized he was carrying. The superficial care he had feared had been replaced by a deep roots connection. On the drive back to his apartment, the car was quiet, but it was a full silence. Alina reached over and held his hand as she drove. She didn't check her watch. She didn't talk about his cholesterol. She talked about how the light hit the trees in the backyard. The meaning of genuine. When they arrived back at Willow Creek, Alina helped him to his door. She didn't just drop him off. She walked him in, made sure his favorite lamp was on, and lingered by the door. "Is there anything else you need, Dad? Not vitamins need, but need." Arthur looked at her. "I have everything I need right here." As she drove away, Arthur sat back in his chair. He looked at the mahogany clock. It was 8 o'clock. She had stayed for nearly 6 hours. He realized then that the 6 signs were a warning, but they weren't a life sentence. People can change. Relationships can be salvaged from the wreckage of busy schedules and emotional avoidance. The concern was no longer a duty. It wasn't a check-in. It was a choice. He picked up a pen and a notepad. He began to write a letter to Alina, not about his health or his will, but about the day he first saw her as a baby, and how her eyes had looked exactly like they did today when she laughed in the old kitchen. The story of the model daughter was over. The story of Alina and Arthur had finally begun. 6 signs of superficial care. Is your child's concern genuine? The title remained a memory, a catalyst for a transformation. Arthur knew now that genuine concern isn't found in the things you do, but in the parts of yourself you are willing to give away. He closed his eyes, the sound of the jazz record still echoing in his mind. And for the first time in years, he slept without the heavy companion of loneliness. Would you like me to write a short epilogue focusing on the grandchildren's perspective of this new family dynamic?